taught me all these things? You may be wondering. So that's it. Just make sure you do what it says. If you haven't, it's on you throughout the video. You got nowhere to run to. Hey, what's up guys, it's Sam here once again. I hope you guys are doing well and you're staying safe. So last week I was talking about what really happens to your body when you work out, and I said something. Let's take a look. Basically, exercise is the most transformative thing you can actually do to your brain. First, it has immediate effects on the brain due to the instant increase in the levels of neurotransmitters in the brain like dopamine, which I would love to talk about later. So today we're taking a look at dopamine, just what the title says, understanding dopamine, a way to trick your brain to work hard. Of course, I use the word trick intentionally, which you're going to understand later as the video goes on. Stay tuned. So what are we waiting for? Let's get into it. First, before we go on, we have to really know what dopamine is, primarily the definition and what it's actually about. And so this is Wikipedia. Dopamine is an organic chemical of the catecholamine and phenethylamine families. It functions both as a hormone and a neurotransmitter. It plays several important roles in the brain and the body. Now let's go a little bit into biochemistry or physiology. Dopamine is actually an amine group that is synthesized from removal of carboxy group from its precursor L-dopa, and L-dopa is actually synthesized in the brain and in the kidney too. Now, in the brain, dopamine functions as a neurotransmitter, and this is actually a chemical released by neurons, nerve cells, to transmit signals from one nerve cell to another. Now, dopamine is made in the brain through a two-step process. First, amino acid tyrosine is converted to dopa, and dopa is converted to dopamine. Now, how does dopamine make us feel? There's a lot of misconception on this. How does dopamine actually make us feel? Dopamine is known as a feel-good neurotransmitter, a neurotransmitter that ferries information between nerve cells. Now, the brain releases dopamine when we eat food that we crave, when people have sex, when we do things that are pleasurable, things that are satisfying actually, which contributes to feelings of pleasure and satisfaction as a part of the reward system of the brain. Now, this important neurochemical boosts mood, motivation and attention. It also helps regulate movement, learning and actually emotions. Now, dopamine causes you to want, dopamine causes you to desire, dopamine causes you to seek out, dopamine causes you to be curious about information. You want to know more actually about something that is pleasurable to you. Now, this is what dopamine does. It creates a reward seeking loop in the sense that people actually want to repeat actions or behaviors that bring them pleasure actually, like checking your Instagram, like taking drugs actually. Now, what triggers dopamine? There are a lot of different things that can actually trigger dopamine, and that's actually the purpose of the video today. So we can use the triggering of dopamine in our brains to make it actually work hard. Of all things that can trigger dopamine, here's a fun one. Now, when you're exposed to sunlight or light in general, it actually increases the number of your dopamine receptors and also gives you vitamin D. And increasing the number of your dopamine receptors actually activate the genes that actually help the brain to release dopamine, which is probably why people like being glued to their screens. Now, this is a fun fact about drug misuse and addiction. Drugs such as cocaine can cause a big fast increase of dopamine in your brain that satisfies your natural reward system in a big way. But actually, repeated drug use, like over time, can actually increase the threshold of this pleasure, meaning that you have to take 50 milligrams of a particular drug to get 100% of pleasure. By next week, you would have to take about 150 milligrams of that same drug to get the same level of pleasure. Now, from me doing a lot of study over this topic, I figured out there's a strange myth that people have concerning drug abuse or drug addiction. You probably may never have heard of it before. Some people believe people are not actually addicted to drugs. People are actually addicted to dopamine, probably because it is what is released after you take drugs. But if you say people can actually be addicted to dopamine, does that mean it can be addicted to insulin too, since they're practically just both hormones? Now, experiences that make you feel good or makes you have a feeling of pleasure actually triggers your reward system of the brain, which in turn releases dopamine. Now this release actually causes your brain to focus more attention on the experience itself. Now when you focus more on the experience, you are left with a very strong memory of the pleasure you felt while performing a particular action, and that is why anytime again your brain just wants to get that pleasure again because it has focused more on that pleasure. Actually, the underlying source of all this addiction is still the behavior. It's still sex, it's still taking drugs, anything that makes you feel pleasurable. Now here's something you might actually want to know generally about addiction or motivation at all. Generally speaking, when you feel an experience of positive sensation and dopamine is released into the pathways of your reward system, your brain actually begins to think or begins to wonder what actually triggered this sensation. Was it a type of behavior? Was it a type of food? Were you with a particular person? Was it in the night? Where did this actually happen? Now your brain tries to get every cue to the information or everything that actually happened when you got that experience. Now after some time, when you experience to those or anything similar to those experiences or those cues that your brain already stored, you begin to feel a strong desire, strong want for that pleasure again. Now you have to actually understand that this drive or this desire could actually be extremely strong and hard to control sometimes. Now here's why or how we can actually trick our brains to work hard. Yeah, dopamine is actually a motivator, and this is where it actually gets interesting. When I was in high school or secondary school, my mom actually found a way of getting me to do my best in school. Anytime I had an exam or when the semester is starting, she promises me what she knows I actually really want for a particular number of A's. Now the most interesting one was when I was going to take my second jump, which was a matriculation board that you have to write to get into the university in Nigeria. So while I was taking my second jump, on the morning of the exam, someone I respect so much came up to me and said, if you get any score above 300, I'm going to get you any shoe you want. And at that point, I was wishing for just one particular shoe. Well, fun fact, I pretty much passed that score. Now, all of us actually took part in these activities without actually understanding the biology or the psychology behind these activities. I know you could be skeptical about these things, like you could be worried that what if there's no one to reward you? What if there's no one to buy you something after you perform a particular work or hard work? And that's why you can do some things to actually trigger your dopamine yourself. And here's what I do when I read. Sometimes when I read, I set a timer for 40 minutes, during which I do nothing else but studying. And after the 40 minutes, I have 10 minutes of playing my favorite game, and the reward system triggers your dopamine, and you love the whole situation already. Nevertheless, there are other ways of you increasing the level of your dopamine so that you get motivated. There are natural ways by which you can trigger your dopamine. The most important one is you getting enough protein. Now proteins are actually made from smaller building blocks called amino acids. There are about 23 different types of amino acids, and these amino acids, some of them can be synthesized by your body itself, and some you have to get from food. When I was defining or talking about dopamine in the introduction, I talked about an amino acid, tyrosine, and tyrosine is one of the amino acids you need in your body to get dopamine. So when you increase the amount of protein you take into your body, then the amount of tyrosine in your body is also increased, which in turn is converted into dopamine, and that will increase the level of your dopamine in your body. Second one, which I talked about in the last video, is very important: exercise often. Exercise is actually recommended for boosting endorphin levels in the body or improving your mood, and these levels are actually increased after about 10 minutes of aerobic activities or at least 20 minutes of vigorous aerobic activity. This one is also very important: get enough sleep. When dopamine is released in the brain, it creates feelings of alertness and wakefulness. Studies show that dopamine is released in large amounts in the morning when it's time to wake up, and that level naturally fall in the evening when it's time to go to sleep. However, lack of sleep can actually disrupt this natural rhythm of increase in dopamine and fall in dopamine. That's pretty much it. I hope you guys loved the video. I hope you guys learned something, and we're about to start tricking our brains to work harder and harder to get us success. And make sure you subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and make sure you like the video. Make sure you share this video to your friends so we can all understand our dopamine and how they affect our lives. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.